Welcome to The Business. I'm Lanre Akinola. On this show, we break down business and its impact on Africa and Africans. Business affects every one of us, whoever we are, wherever we are. In the news this week, China's ICBC and Kenya's Stanbic Bank have launched a joint credit card. The aim is to tap into growing Chinese tourist arrivals. Nigeria awards oil purchase contracts to 50 companies. With elections looming, more than half go to local firms. And this week's big story, U.S. private equity investor Texas Pacific Group spends $47.5 million on a stake in Nigerian-Kenyan fintech company Cellulant. Is African tech going mainstream? And in the week's breakdown, we look at resource nationalism. Is it making a comeback? Joining me throughout for commentary and insight is Vuyiswa Ngomongwana, broadcaster and Africa watcher. And in part two, I'll be talking to Leila Ben Hassan, founder and CEO at Blue Jay Communication, about the blue economy. Tourist arrivals from China to Kenya have doubled since 2015 and are expected to hit 60,000 this year. To tap into this opportunity, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China and Stanbic Bank of Kenya are launching a new credit card. Vuyiswa, exciting story this one. We're looking at the tip of the iceberg here. Chinese tourism is becoming big business in Africa. Yes. What do you make of that?
Oh, I smile deeply and hopefully in my sleep as well at the prospect, because in terms of the big world economic picture, this, what some call a yellow peril, but to us, a ray of sunshine in terms of opportunity is coming to Africa, because we have literally been locked into economic poverty, by a Western system. The Chinese are breaking it up.
Let's look at some of the numbers here. The estimate is, this is according to the World Tourism Organization, that Chinese tourists spent $258 billion internationally last year. That is almost twice as much as the USA. And get this, 70 billion more than Germany, France, and the UK combined.
Wow. Well, they have the numbers, and they have a young, burgeoning community of people who want to see the world. Don't forget they had a cultural revolution which locked China from the rest of the planet for over a quarter of a century.
Here's the really good news is that demand for travel to Africa is increasing. There's a survey recently by a global travel platform, and they found that Africa is actually the top destination for Chinese tourists seeking more adventurous holidays, yes, beating Japan and Australia, which are very well established tourist destinations. So the opportunity here is pretty immense.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, even for business people, despite, the skewed relationships because of the legacy of colonialism, let's move past that without ignoring it and just recognizing that this third player is an opportunity for us to actually define the terms based on Africa first. And that's what I'd be interested in seeing when we look at the nitty-gritty of the details of whatever the agreements are.
Now, tourism is a business opportunity, but it's also a development opportunity. One of the big challenges Africa has is job creation, and tourism and the hospitality sector is one industry in which you can have mass employment. So surely this should be a priority for governments to tap into.
And I think it is a priority for the Kenyan government. Absolutely, it makes complete sense. The royal family see Kenya as their most favored destination, for example. So and they'll probably go there on honeymoon, like Prince William and his wife did. But at the end of the day, there's no denying Africa's beauty, and that's our greatest asset in terms of getting the world to see us as we really are. Now the question is, do we trust ourselves to create a scenario where we can actually benefit from it?
Thank you, Vuyiswa. Expect to hear a lot more about this one. The Nigerian government has just awarded oil purchase contracts to 50 companies. 32 of them are local. Vuyiswa, this is an interesting one. On the surface, it looks like you have a government that is encouraging domestic private sector growth. It's great to see the Nigerian government investing in local oil companies. We know for a long time that's been a problem. But There's a bit of a question mark around this because we are, of course, heading into an election year.
Assume that there's moral integrity behind these contracts. But you are right in thinking that there is good reason to be suspicious based on past experience. Is Nigeria actually opening the doors to more equal playing in the business field? I don't have enough information to know that.
How could this help improve economic conditions in Nigeria and ultimately development?
Assuming the field is actually even, that the best should rise to the top. And that's the kind of thinking I think that a lot of young entrepreneurs in Nigeria are focusing their minds on.
If this is just a ploy to win electoral votes, does it risk setting things back even further?
Of course it does, but let's give the government a fair fighting chance in terms of how things evolve.
It's unusual for you to say,
No. I'm a pragmatist at the end of the day, but I'm not shy from saying what I think is incorrect. But you have to be open in your open criticism, to be fair, to allow the scenario to play out. But based on past experience, yes, plenty of reason to be pessimistic.
Politics or economy, we'll have to wait and see. This week's big story is that TPG, Texas Pacific Group, that's one of the world's biggest private equity companies, has invested $47.5 million into Nigerian-Kenyan financial technology company Cellulant. African fintech has caught the eye of global investors in recent years. Well, everything's about apps these days. Yeah. Africa is finally getting in on the act here. Rather than playing catch-up, they're starting to attract some big money here. Are you excited about this kind of investment? I'm
very excited, and something that our viewers may not be aware is that Africa is leading the world in terms of the evolution of mobile technology. And, so it should, because we are huge in population, and communication is the key to breaking down the misunderstanding, the mysteries, and the divisions between us. So this revolution that's going on, it's about information and communication at the end of the day. And for me, when more people are informed, they can actually be able to come to their governments and not only criticize, but come forward with practical, workable suggestions. That's what I'm excited about in that regard.
Now, looking specifically at this deal, they've invested in basically a money transfer company.
Yes.
And we know financial inclusion is a big development challenge across Africa. It's got to be exciting to see companies like this that are helping to bridge that gap, enabling people to move money across borders, send money home. Got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty of the evolution of the technology is that it's actually making borders irrelevant. And for Africans, that means the world. Literally, we can reach the world, and I can't see any disadvantage with regard to that. And I can see the beginnings of a new way of capitalizing on economic growth in a different way, a different model that's more equitable than the one we've dealt with in the past.
Keep an eye on this one. Tech in Africa is going mainstream. In this week's breakdown, is resource nationalism making a comeback? Governments are cracking down on mining companies across the world, and especially in Africa, and miners don't like it. So the story is this week, the CEO of Rio Tinto, which is the world's second largest mining company, has said that growing resource nationalism is posing a risk to investors.
Yes.
He's talking about governments cracking down on mining companies. We've seen the DRC hike royalties. We've seen Tanzania slap massive tax bills on mining companies. They're obviously not happy, but what's the problem here? Is it such a bad thing?
Well, it's all, there's no escaping the legacy of colonialism in that it was set up to ensure that the deals were never going to be favorable for Africans. So now the worm is turning, as it would. It's just a natural evolution. And you're calling it resource nationalism. When did it actually ever thrive? You say it's coming back. It never arrived. And finally, it's beginning to arrive.
And we have to also define what resource nationalism is. And when you look at the definition, you have to ask yourself, what's so wrong with it? It's loosely defined as a government seeking to get more benefits from a country's national wealth.
Yes.
Surely that's a totally reasonable objective.
Absolutely. That's what the Western governments do all the time. So African governments are doing exactly the same thing. It's almost like if you look at the overview and see the dynamics at play, the worm is turning, but that's just part of the evolution of a country seeking to grow itself. And because the borders are non-existent, thanks to the technological evolution we're living, it's going to be much more difficult for the powers that did rule Africa with an iron hand to have such an easy time.
Now, there's one dimension to this, which is objectively, it makes perfect sense for African governments and countries to exercise a little bit more control and have a more equal relationship with mining companies. But there is, of course, the other question of whether or not the governments can be trusted, because African governments don't have a great track record when it comes to using natural resource wealth to actually invest in broad-based sustainable development. So who is keeping a tab on what the governments do with this money?
The very nature of the actual spread of information because of the technological revolution is actually making it harder for governments to hide in dark corners and do nefarious deals. People are more confident than ever with good information to make suggestions, as I said earlier. Let's not focus so much about not trusting the government, but actually getting more excited about the grassroots evolution of communication that's going to challenge the long-standing imperfections in all African governments.
Thank you very much. As always, Vuyiswa, resource nationalism, good or bad, we'll have to wait and see. Join me in part 2 when I'll be sitting down with Leila Ben Hassan, founder and CEO of Blue Jay Communication. Welcome back to The Business, the show where we break down business and its impact on Africa and Africans. I'm Lan Rakinol, and I'm delighted to be joined by Leila Ben Hassan, founder and CEO of Blue Jay Communication. Leila, thank you so much for joining me on The Business today. Now, we're here to talk about something called the blue economy. It sounds very mysterious. Could you give us a bit of an insight on what we mean when we say the blue economy?
Thanks, Larry. I will put it in very simple explanation and words. So, everyone talks about agriculture, and we always associate agriculture with lands and with green. So let's take a blue economy, let's associate it blue with everything related to the water. So I mean by that oceans, seas, rivers, lakes, everything related to water and liquid.
And everything that takes place on the water, everything that's connected to the water. So we're talking about trade here, we're talking about fisheries here, we're talking about sustainability here, we're talking about all sorts of things.
Absolutely, it covers different sectors. To start is fishing, because when we say sea, we say fish, we say fishing. So to start with fishing, and also covers energy. We use wave energy thanks to the water and the oceans. We know energy is a big subject in Africa, and we have tourism, we have trade, we have ports, logistics. We also have other sectors like the seabed mining, the offshore oil and gas. So it is really large.
How important is this to Africa? Now, the way you've explained it, it almost seems self-explanatory. Well, how can you not be aware of the blue economy? But it's not something that you hear that much about. Could you give us a bit of a sense of just how this impacts a place like Africa?
You are right. A blue economy, it's not a familiar word or concept in the media or even in the business industry. But actually, we live every day in the blue economy. So what is it for Africa? We have 70% of Africa is covered by the coast. And then the sea is a big source of food, is a big source of energy. So it is extremely important to our continent.
To just put it in economic terms, I came across a survey that was done of economists, and they estimate the value of the blue economy internationally to be $24 trillion. Now, when you put it that way, maybe that's when you start getting people's attention. Is there an understanding of the economic value, the business value, the commercial value of this? Because this isn't just about going and sitting on the beach. This is about money.
Yeah, I don't think we are 100% aware of the value of the blue economy. Hence, it's more focused on agriculture and on the land. That's why we are now starting to talk more and more about the value and the opportunities we are missing or we are not tapping yet. And so we can imagine how many jobs we can create, how many families we can feed, how many import and export. So it's all about business, it's all about trade, it's all about sustainable growth. We are missing we're missing, let's put it this way, big, huge of opportunities, but we are getting there. So we need to get there, and some countries in Africa, we have to say, they already started, like Seychelles.
Okay, we'll pick up on that. We'll pick up on who's getting it right. But let's talk a little bit more about the debate around this. There is a debate, and I know that you were in Mexico earlier this year for something called the World Ocean Summit, which is the #1 platform for discussion around the blue economy. Tell me a little bit about the representation from Africa out there.
Well, I was quite surprised, not to say shocked, because I expected to find so many countries from Africa, but unfortunately there were no presence. And as far as I know, I was probably the only African there.
That's
and
unbelievable. I mean, that's crazy.
It looks like some of the companies' priorities is not Africa. Sadly, it is like China, India, other places. However, I don't think like we Africa, we are behind. We are there. We are into the blue economy. Just we need more presence. We need to talk about it more, and also to understand it.
Tell us a little bit about what Blue Jay Communication is up to, because you're bringing people together and you're doing it right here in London, aren't you?
As far as I know, it's the first platform, Pan-African platform, where we are going to talk about the blue economy. So I'm glad at least we are there. We started, so we can't say Africa behind. We are not. So we started the conversation. I wanted my company, Blue Jay Communication, to create this platform because it's a subject that means a lot to me as a person, and also what we need to do is, contribute to our continent is our responsibility. So let's do something also different, something like can create job for young. It's all for me about how we can help and contribute to create jobs for young people.
Which is one of Africa's biggest challenges
exactly
today.
And how we can, blue economy is how to feed people and how to create, reduce poverty, and it's about food, and also how we can contribute actively to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and one of them is about water and like gender equality, also how we can involve women more in these sectors, and about young.
Who are you bringing together? Because there's an obvious development angle to this, but one thing that we know is that sometimes it can be difficult to get the business community engaged in these kinds of issues. What's been your experience? Is this something that the private sector is starting to understand?
It is very challenging to be
I think you might be understating it.
No, I have to say it was very challenging, because every time you pick up the phone or try to talk to people, hold on a second, what are you talking about? What is the blue economy? So number one, you have to explain what is the blue economy to get people involved, because they are into the blue economy, but it's just the concept is quite new. So you have to explain what is the blue economy, what is it for them, because it's always about business. So what is it for them, why they should take part. So I try to bring the private sector and the government. It's always about partnership, both private and public sectors, who are coming like ministers from different countries in Africa, private sector, not that much, so hopefully they will come in. Still there are 3 weeks to go. But also what I need to tell you that the Murdoch University in Australia, they are very into blue economy, and they are coming to explain what is the blue economy, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges.
Which is how you start, right?
Exactly.
You also have to raise awareness, and this is a big part of it. When is this happening?
On the 7th and 8th of June.
Okay, now you said earlier that you mentioned the Seychelles as a country that is starting to embrace the blue economy. Makes sense, given that the Seychelles is a collection of islands. But where else in Africa do you see progress? And what are some of the bottlenecks? What are some of the critical issues here that is stopping governments, becoming much more proactive in raising awareness and harnessing and leveraging the economic potential of the blue economy?
Yeah, the Seychelles, they are quite advanced because they have the Ministry of a Blue Economy, and they have a dedicated minister for the blue economy. They are quite active. But the good news also, there is another big event happening in Kenya in November. So this is, I think, good news, because if everyone talk about it and doing something about it, so this is really, really good news. There are few countries, because when you see the case studies, like there is in Zanzibar, there is in Cape Verde, there are in Tunisia, in Morocco. So there are a few countries where there are case studies, but we don't say it is part of the blue economy.
Tell me a bit about Tunisia. You are from Tunisia.
I am from Tunisia.
Tell us a bit about how Tunisia is approaching this. Could you maybe list some examples of how governments are taking proactive steps?
I don't think they are proactive as it should be yet. But we will get there. We will get there because I also heard they are going to do something and at the end of the year for blue economy. You know, it's raising the awareness. You know, but for me as a Tunisian, and I come from a small island, so I can see also when I was young and how we have like the sponge and the maritime and the fishing and how the industry, but then suddenly nothing. I can't see like before, you know, we used to sell the sponges and we do it, there is farm sponges. Recently I read about Zanzibar and about sustainable business and a lady, she's doing it and I was like, yeah, we used to do it in my island. This is great to see it back. There are so many industry, they disappear but or like reducing, but we need them.
And we often don't understand why, right? And that's because there isn't that awareness. Now, one last question. We are running out of time, but let's try to look ahead over the next 3 to 5 years or so. What do you think needs to happen so that Africa, one, doesn't miss the opportunity, but of course also that Africa is aware of the risks of not tending properly to the oceans, because this is also about climate change, this is about sustainable development, this is about security, etc., etc. Yeah. It's not just about making money.
Yeah, security is a big, one of the big subject, and the illegal fishing and the IUU. So what we need to understand it. Once you understand something and then you take action. So number one, we have to understand of the importance of the blue economy. This is our present, and also we have to think about the future for the next generation, because at the end of the day, we all go, it's what is left. With the blue economy, it's also about, you know, it's simple things. We have summer is soon. Everyone is going to the beach, but think about how to protect it. Don't throw plastics. Don't kill the fish. Don't kill. Think about simple things, but they are involved in the blue economy.
Well, thank you very much, Leila. June 7th and 8th. I'm actually going on holiday in 2 weeks to the Indian Ocean, so I will have the blue economy very much on my mind. Thank you again, Leila.
Thank you, Larry.
That's all we have time for. Thank you for watching The Business, and please join us again next time.